Silverfang will be the next SSR Plus character coming out in March. So here's everything you need to know about Silverfang and whether or not he is worth pulling for. So let's get into his attack skills. So for his basic attack, he attacks a single target with 2 hits for 120% of his attack, and triggers a combo attack which summons Bangpu and he deals additional damage, which I'll explain later when going through his passive skills. And for his ultimate attack, he attacks all enemies with 5 hits for 300% of his attack, and he inflicts internal injury onto 3 random enemies, which is based on 200% of his attack. He will also trigger a combo attack which once again summons Bangpu, which I'll explain in the next segment. And for his ultra ultimate attack, he will also trigger a combo attack which once again summons Bangpu. And if you have his keepsake, you'll unlock his ultra ultimate attack where he'll attack all enemies for 350% of his attack, and he'll inflict internal injury to all enemies, which is based on 250% of his attack. So in terms of pure damage numbers, he has the highest out of any character with 350% to all enemies, which is much higher than Child Emperor's AoE, and he'll do a massive amount of total damage in battle throughout those rounds, so it's going to be a very high number in battle. This number can be further increased when going over his combo mechanic, which I'll explain shortly. So going through his passive skills, so for his regular passive, after taking action, he removes sealed energy once per round, which can be helpful against King and Watchdog Man users for the first 2 rounds. And he has a 30% chance to trigger evasion, which reduces any incoming direct, extra, charge, or berserk damage down to 1 damage, which I guess you can say it acts like an undying shield where you take 0 damage, but it's now 1 instead of 0. If you manage to limit break him to 5 stars, he'll be able to remove sealed energy for the first 3 rounds and have a 40% chance to trigger evasion. And if you manage to unlock his 5p awakening, he'll be able to remove sealed energy for the first 4 rounds and have a 50% chance to trigger evasion. Now going through his awakened passive, when Silverfang attacks, he summons Bangpu to launch a combo attack where Bangpu is summoned into the battle and inherits 100% of Silverfang's attack. So if you use Silverfang's basic attack, then Bangpu will attack a random enemy for 100% of his attack. And if you use Silverfang's ultimate attack, then Bangpu attacks all enemies with 3 hits for 180% of his attack. So at a minimum, they'll be able to dish out a total of 480% of his attack as damage to the entire team. Now if you do manage to unlock his second awakening, Bangpu's ultimate attack is increased to 210% of his attack, and a new additional buff is granted which reduces 250 of the enemy's energy points for every enemy afflicted with internal injury. So having Silverfang's keepsake will allow you to produce a total of 1500 energy points, which equals to 1.5 energy. So pair him with King Plus in your team and your opponent will be gasping for air with the little amount of energy you are granting them each round. So overall, if he is fully invested into with his keepsake and awakened too, they will be able to deal 560% of their attack to the entire team, which is insanely high for an AoE attacker, and that will be the highest we're going to see for a very long time. Going through his enhancements, so for his talent page, I would recommend unlocking both of his talent pages, and from his second page, I would recommend upgrading his base attack, damage rate, and crit. And from his third page, I would upgrade his base attack, ult damage, and crit damage. Those should be your top priority. And then those marked inside the blue circles are also good stats to upgrade if you do have the spare talent points to do so. For his damage sigils, use sword sigils if he will become your main damage dealer, otherwise ruthless sigils will also work just fine. And for his support sigils, use vitality sigils. In regards to his limit break, at a minimum, get him up to 5 stars as soon as you can, as you'll be able to increase his evasion chance to 40%. And in regards to his awakening, at a minimum, also get him to 5p as soon as you can, as then you'll be able to increase his evasion chance to 50%. Now the reason why I'm stating that his 5p is a must is that without this 5p passive, he does get countered pretty easily, which I'll go over much later, but he definitely needs his 5p if you do plan on using him. So going through his gears now, so for his gear set, the best set for him would be a fiery or machine set. Otherwise, the next best set is gunner when paired with a crit build, then followed by primal. And with his gears, you would want either all 4 of those pieces having attack bonus, or you could opt with a crit build with 2 attack bonus, 1 crit rate, and 1 crit damage piece. Now the crit rate piece is needed, but the crit damage piece, from testing months ago from other YouTubers like Gamma and whatnot, it doesn't seem as necessary, so you can use 3 attack bonus and 1 crit rate piece if you want to. And for his buff gears, all of them should have attack, with your hero gear having attack bonus and flat attack, your grappler gear having crit and flat attack, and your S-class gear having damage rate and flat attack. And if you manage to get an augmentation from upgrading your S-class gear, getting an internal injury or crit augment would work best with Silverfang. Now I will also be providing some examples of what some lineups can look like with Silverfang. So for the higher end players, the most common team that I did find with Silverfang is the first example, where you have Carnage, Silverfang, and King alongside Metalbat, Galewind, and Garuganship. This will probably most likely be the meta team for most players. Now you can replace Galewind with Boros Awakened 2. I've also seen that being used, but if not, it's either Galewind or Boros that you can swap out. But this team seems like the strongest team you can get. Now Silverfang can be put in the sped up row or not. It's gonna be a lot of testing. From what I saw, people tested Silverfang with and without being sped up, and they did win either way, but that's because, I guess, in Life Clash, for example, it's very situational depending on if you're a red or blue team. So they're gonna have to be some testing to reconfigure what the best optimization of the lineup will be, so you'll be seeing that from many of the higher end players, but this is definitely one of the teams that you'll be seeing. Otherwise, you could see other teams like an example 2, where instead you have Sonic V2 as your speed sensitive king, and then you have Boros to fill in that second Esper slot, and then you have Carnage and Silverfang to fill for the Scrappler slots, and then you have Metalbat if you do have Metalbat, because he's quite useful to use as a sub DPS, I guess, to dish out additional damage when he revives and from his ultimate. Now for the third team, you could also see once again with King, Garuganship as your Espers, and Carnage and Silverfang as your grapplers. Now Child Emperor isn't too bad as well. If you do have Child Emperor, you can use him as well. The dogs will be kind of helpful, and just constant AoE damage from both Child Emperor and Silverfang. Now I mean, you won't really have enough energy to do both of them, but Silverfang is definitely much more important than Child Emperor. Child Emperor is just there for his dogs to dish out damage. And now you can also go with the fourth example, where instead of King you do have Sonic as your speed sub, but you can still use Watchdog Man to help out that Carnage Kubuto. Now recently I don't think Watchdog Man is being used heavily by the higher end players anymore, because the unyielding is basically useless, so it's only for the HP passive, which in all honesty, if you are fighting a Metalbat, a very strong Metalbat from those whale players, he kind of shreds through that Carnage if it's just all 4 of those hits being targeted into Carnage Kabuto, so when it's like a 2v2 situation. So Watchdog Man might not be the most beneficial unit, but there are 4 examples, so this could be another example what a lineup can look like with Silverfang in your team, as you do have 2 spare slots, so Watchdog Man can be one, and then you have Boros there to fill in that Esper slot as well. So here are some examples of what higher end players might be utilizing when using Silverfang into their main PvP teams. Now in terms of low end players, if you do decide on pulling Silverfang, one example can be in the first team, where you should have Carnage Kubuto and Garuganship course, and then you have 3 SSR plus, so you can use this team. If you got Sonic, then that's good. For PvP, he'll be strong, as he'll be able to speed up both Carnage and Silverfang. Then you need to fill up those Esper slots. So if you have RMG, she's a good replacement to use, or temporary replacement to use as an Esper. And you can also use Sky King, because Sky King is very helpful when paired with Carnage Kabuto for more damage reflex. So this is a strong team. Now, if you don't have Sonic V2, you could also go with example 2, where I just replaced him with Phoenix Man, which Phoenix Man was free for most people if you were playing around the later end of last year, so this team will also work quite well if you do have Silverfang with pairing him with Carnage and Gargantuar Core. So this could be a team as well. Now, if you decided to pull for ATT instead of RMG, then you can opt for example 3, where you do have ATT paired up with Vaccine Man and then Gargantuar to have those 3 Espers with Carnage Kubrita, which everyone should have pulled, and Silverfang. So those 2 grapplers will fill up, and then the last slot can be whoever you want, but Alloy is not a bad substitute for now because he does have the ult damage reduction to surrounding allies, so that's not a bad replacement there. And now with example 4, I made a team so that if you didn't manage to pull someone like Carnage Kubrita, so Silverfang is your second SSR plus, or maybe even your first SSR plus unit, then you can use a team like this, where if you manage to get Lightning Genji, he's quite useful because when he does use his ult, he gives a shield to Silverfang in the back there, and then that will also increase Silverfang's attack, so that could be a very good support unit for Silverfang. If you manage to pull Suru, Suru is also a great sub DPS attacker that you can use if you're running out of DPS damage from Silverfang, because you do need another DPS to help you out. So Suru is a pretty good unit to use. Otherwise, if you don't have Suru, you could use Gara or Geketsu. If you did buy the hero backup stick, they're quite good as well. And I also put down an SR like Fist Fight Jin, who does have Encourage, so he can give you 1 extra energy point, which when going up against King or now even Silverfang, when they do reduce your energy gauge, Jin will be able to encourage your team and give out 1 extra energy, so that will be quite helpful when going up against them. So these are some examples of what lower end players can look like if they did decide to get Silverfang and they don't have all of the extremely heavy invested SSR plus characters that were just previously stated. So going through the main takeaways from this unit, he is a very strong AoE DPS unit, as he has the potential to deal 560% of his attack to all enemies thanks to his combo attack with Bangpu. So his total damage number in battle will be very high if you thought Child Emperor's damage was really high. So Silverfang's will be much more higher, and it's probably going to be a very high value that we haven't seen in global before. He can also inflict the entire team with debuffs if you do have his keepsake, which is very handy in reducing the amount of energy your opponent can use if you also pair that with his Awaken 2, on top of him being able to remove sealed energy from those King users. And finally, he is able to reduce all forms of incoming damage, which makes his survivability much higher, especially on top of Gargantuar's core. Now, this doesn't, however, include dot, such as force field, burn, corrosion, etc. So do take that into account, especially for the future when the dot meta kicks in. Now, going through his cons, the major con about him is that he needs massive investment, where you need to fully max him out by getting his keepsake, his 5p, and Awaken 2 passive. Otherwise, as stated in my next point, he becomes very squishy without his 5p, as his evasion isn't 100%, so you want his evasion to be as high as humanly possible. As the current meta stands, normally it comes down to a 2v2 scenario with Carnage Kubrita and Metalbat, and from what my research found is that Silverfang does die even before then most of the time, so he does get targeted pretty easily and does die pretty quickly. So he just dishes a lot of damage initially in the first few rounds, and then he does die, and then he lets the others like Metalbat and Carnage do their thing. In future, there are also much better grappler alternatives for Gargantuar's core, such as Goketsu, Deep Sea King, and Tank Top Master, just to name a few. So I will be fully transparent with you, his meta isn't very long at all. In fact, he does get fairly overwhelmed and countered pretty easily by stuns and from breakthrough units. So he will only be able to shine the most within the 1 month of his debut, before even someone like Atomic Samurai comes out, who will change the meta a lot more. So should you pull for Silverfang? So for free to play, low and mid spenders, he is an easy skip. There's no point in getting him, and save your resources for future characters. And for high spenders, I would also advise to skip, since his meta isn't very long and he requires both his keepsake and Awaken 2 if you do plan on pulling him. So you either have to go all in or all out. He can still be useful though for other 2 and 3 team game modes if you still want to get him and use him for that. or even if he is your favorite character from the entire franchise, then sure, you can pull for him, that's totally up to you, you can do whatever you want. Just in terms of the overall meta, he isn't extremely strong in due time. And now I present the predicted SSR Plus timeline for global. So everything so far in terms of the monthly banner has been accurate, which is good to see. Now I predict that Phoenix Man will also be announced as an Awakened Wheel character during the middle of March in order to make up for the rushing of King's Awakened Wheel. But I guess we'll have to wait and see what the weekly news says in about 2 weeks time, if I was right or wrong. And that wraps up the end of the video, so I'd love to give shoutouts to all of my amazing YouTube members, so special thanks to my X tier members being Gamma, Blackshot, Shinobu PK, Skies, Creighton, Marcus, Lou, Zell, Burnt Ramen, and Peppermang. My Y tier members being Dragon, EQ, Jared, Niani, Dominic, and Monkey. And my Z tier members being Zelion, Dove, Freddy, God K, Sly Rider, Aesop, Low Hanging Fruit, Bang, and Great Leader. So thank you all very much for your increasing amount of support, as you guys are massive contributors in making this type of content possible. And I also have an idea where I might start posting something in particular every month on my channel from now on, so look out for that if I don't get too busy. So anyways, that's all for today, and I will catch you all next time.